Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and the question on everyone's mind is Shadows of Change now worth it post-introduction of patch 4.2? If you may not be aware, the Shadows of Change DLC was released in August of 2023 and it was met with a really poor reception for obvious reasons. The DLC price was increased to €25, £20, and despite the fact that it had more legendary lords in terms of paid content and started covering 3 races instead of the average 2 for lord packs, it actually had less content overall. This, paired with a lot of other drama, started what was called the downfall of Total War. It's been a long 6 months, but it seems that Creative Assembly have started to kind of reel things back in. Now, I've originally covered this DLC as a review back in August, as that's when the DLC first launched. However, we've got massive content changes and I wanted to kind of revisit that with new thoughts and, well, yeah, we have to talk about a bunch of new stuff, a lot of new developments, and I figured it would be best to redo the video. So yeah, let's begin. We're going to talk about everything, even stuff that we've talked about in the past, because things can now be seen with new light. So yeah, let's begin. Shadows of Change is a DLC that focuses around 3 factions. This is Kislev, Grand Cathay, and Tzeentch, all base game factions from Total War Warhammer 3. This is the first time that we've had a DLC of this format, where a Lord pack, originally just 2 factions, 1 versus 1, was turned into 3 factions, which in theory meant more content overall. This seems to be the case now, but wasn't originally. Now, all these factions were in desperate need of some extra additions, and they've all gotten some pretty interesting additions, with some very strange ones too. There's clearly the focus on making the legendary lords as interesting as possible, which obviously is fair, that's how they generate their sales, with adding in some rather big ticket units when possible to fluff up the factions overall. This has worked out for some, but also not worked for others, so we're going to jump into each of the individual factions and see what it offers. We'll start off with Grand Cathay, as I believe most people were excited about that faction in particular. For the legendary lords, Grand Cathay introduced Yuan Bo, one of the dragon children of the celestial family. He acts as the leader of the central provinces and is the administrator for Grand Cathay instead of his father, who is never going to really be seen as a playable legendary character. Yuan Bo as a melee character is actually quite strong, possibly stronger than the other 2 dragon siblings, and he has a bunch of interesting mechanics, some new and others just expanded from the base game ones. One such addition is just some extra parts to the compass that Grand Cathay originally had. It's not that much more interesting than it generally was, but it added some more bonus effects that you could play around with, and they were completely unique to him. The next is a dedicated scheme system, which would allow you to get some extra effects like recruiting units instantly, or really you could focus around dedicating buildings if you worked all the way to the end. So this means that you could actually tailor settlements to be economic focused or military focused, which is actually quite interesting, making Yuan Bo the strongest Cathayan legendary lord. Now, power creep is always a thing, but this was kind of cool because it gave you an element of choice on what you wanted to do. So Yuan Bo as a character is much more interesting than Zhao Ming and Miao Yin, which is a bit of a shame considering that these are very specific characters. There's not that many dragon children out and about, so they all should actually be quite different. If you're going to be playing as a Cathayan faction, you might as well be playing as Yuan Bo, as you will get much more benefits and much more interesting stuff to play around with. Yes, he does start in Lustria when it comes to the Immortal Empires, but you can actually ignore that and start working on Grand Cathay proper, so yeah, there's not really much of a problem there. You do have the element of choice of staying in Lustria and getting a bit more cash, or just working on both, or just ignoring Lustria altogether. When it comes to the additions to Grand Cathay, you do actually have a bunch of stuff to play around with. Not only do you have a new legendary lord now, Satang the Watcher, who's focused very heavily on range combat, who is available, by the way, to all Cathayan factions, but you do have a bunch of new units which are available to all the Cathayan factions too. Alongside that is the Celestial General. This is a generic lord option which allows you to finally have some proper frontline melee as a character. It's very different to the Lord Magistrate, who was changed to be more of a support character, where the Celestial General goes up front and personal to smash stuff with his big hammer. Alongside that is the Gatemaster, a brand new hero introduced in 4.2. This is a hybrid character which focuses on ranged and melee combat. This means that the skills that we've had since the release of Total War Warhammer 3 2 years ago, that buffs up the melee capabilities and the defense capabilities of hero characters, can actually finally be properly used now. It's a basic character, but this is here to defend your spellcasters who are generally quite squishy. Alongside that is the addition of 6 brand new units, 4 of which added in the original release and 2 added after. For the original release, we have the Jet Lion, the Jade Lion, the Zhongyu War Drum, and the Onyx Crowmen. These were units that were added in to provide some fast-moving monsters, a buff-centered War Drum which was incredibly strong when it originally first launched, and a skirmishing flyer which was good for picking off random enemies. In patch 4.2, we've seen the addition of the Great Moonbird and the Celestial Lion, 2 flying single-entity monsters, both of which are quite different, as the Moonbird focuses around being a incredibly fast-moving harasser unit which can also cast a Vortex, and the Celestial Lion is a fast-moving flyer which is very good at taking out characters and also tanking enemy leadership. This means that without counting Yuan Bo, this DLC offers 9 new additions to all Grand Cathayan factions, meaning that if you don't want to play as Yuan Bo, you'll be able to play with all these units, with Zhao Ming or Miao Ying, and also with any future dragon children that get added in. It adds into a fairly decent amount of roster for Grand Cathay, which adds a decent amount of fluff to a faction which unfortunately was falling behind to all the other factions that have been getting a lot of DLC for the lifespan of Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2. It's also important to note here that I'm not mentioning Regiments of Renown, as they're not really unique units, they're just literally reskins, which aren't really bad. They're very good at what they do, but they don't really count as something really important for any DLC, to be honest. Next, we'll look towards Kislev, who has a brand new legendary character in the form of Mother Ostankya. There was a fair amount of drama surrounding her, as most people had been waiting for a character known as Baba Yaga, a character that was established in Warhammer Fantasy lore for many years now, but it does seem that Games Workshop, not Creative Assembly, decided that Baba Yaga is no longer a thing. Instead, Mother Ostankya takes her place as the Hag Mother of Kislev. Now, people originally weren't too keen on her, but there has been a release on an ebook which gave her a lot more context and established lore to actually make her fit within the Warhammer Fantasy universe. Now, her start position isn't great. A lot of people don't like it, as she starts in the lands of the Dark Elves, but she can actually teleport fairly early into the campaign into Kislev. I think a lot of people don't like it because it just doesn't feel right, especially when her established lore is all about protecting Kislev. In-game, it's actually established that she's there to get revenge on the Dark Elves for raiding Kislev before, but it still feels like it's really far off, especially with the size of the Warhammer Fantasy world in general. Personally, I don't mind it, but yeah, it does sound a bit weird. Thankfully, there are mods that can kind of fix that and just plop her near Kislev anyway. Now, in terms of mechanics, she's got some pretty interesting ones. She's got a blessing and cursing system which is built up as you progress through your campaign. You'll be fighting several different races and factions as you progress, and with that you'll be getting new ingredients. Those ingredients can then be used to make a blessing or a curse, which you can use with any one of your active armies. Meaning that when you decide to start fighting a different force, you can use some curses to reduce enemy leadership or outright do damage to them passively, or you can use some blessings to increase armor-piercing damage for your forces. There's quite a few of them, but that's the general gist. You're also progressing through your campaign, which is allowing you to get special events that you can pop off whenever you want. Obviously, there is a cooldown with some, like reducing enemy corruption in the area after you've taken over a settlement, using a great tree to teleport around to other great trees, and yeah, this is your main campaign function. This itself is tied to other stuff throughout your campaign, using a special resource known as essences, which can also be used through the blessing and cursing system. It's not too bad. It's definitely very unique when compared to the other Kislevite factions, who are all pretty much using the same system. The one negative towards Mother Ostankya, I would say, is how the other units are treated. You see, the baseline Kislev stuff, the stuff that you paid for originally when you bought the game, is locked behind having to take over one of the major cities or getting a military alliance with one of the factions of the military cities. And while you can get there pretty early on after dealing with the Sisters of Twilight, it's a bit anti-fun. Yes, the focus is to be using monsters and mythical creatures like the Beowulfs or even the Incarnate Elemental, but yeah, it does become kind of frustrating. The spiders and all that type of stuff do get buffed up enough to be really late tier units, but locking units like that for your base game roster is a bit anti-fun. That being said, Mother of Stenka is a fun character, and she is very, very strong when compared to the other Kislevite factions. It very much depends if you like the more primal and spooky version of Kislev, and now the fact that she has her own Law of Magic with the Law of the Hag, we'll talk about that a little bit later, she is a lot stronger. I was doing a battle recently on livestream, and she ended up getting 1,000 kills and doing around 100,000 damage. Originally, she had a bit of a mix of spells, and that was just not fun. It didn't make her seem like it was the big character that she was always meant to be, but now she is a bit larger than life. There have been a bunch of new additions to Kislev over this patch. The first one being the Druzina. This is a brand new Lord option which was added in patch 4.2. It's a skirmish-based character, which is also a hybrid unit. You could use range weapons with it, and also a great weapon. It's there to buff up some units and also refill ammunition, which obviously makes it fantastic for a Kislevite faction that focuses around, well, hybrid warfare and a lot of range weaponry. A lot of people were hoping for Hag Mothers, but it seems that Games Workshop, not Creative Assembly, slapped that down. This was finally communicated to us in the form of a blog where Creative Assembly started giving a peek into how much Games Workshop decide what goes into a game and what doesn't, which is absolutely ridiculous sometimes, considering that some other games are allowed to do a lot more wacky stuff. The Lord option and all units that we'll be talking about are available to all the Kislevite factions, which segues nicely into the new generic hero option known as the Hag Witch. This is a highly mobile spellcaster which has the following 4 laws: the Law of the Beasts, the Law of Death, the Law of Shadows, and the Law of the Hag. This means that Kislev now gets access to not only a third unique Law of Magic, but also 3 of the generic color laws, making them much stronger, giving them a lot more powerful spells. Overall, this is a pretty good addition. Originally it was just Beast, Death, and Shadows, but 4.2 added in the Law of the Hag. A brand new legendary hero joins up with Kislev, being the first proper Kislevite legendary hero. This is the Golden Knight, a melee-focused character which can do a lot of damage, is fantastic at killing off characters, and yeah, is a line holder. Honestly, she's not too bad. She was introduced in fairly recent lore, but this is going to be the case for a lot of stuff for Kislev and for Grand Cathay. I would say that the character is lacking a bear mount, however, considering that she is consecrated by both the Ice Court and also the Cult of the Bear. In terms of new units, Kislev did get a little bit less than all the others. Originally added in Shadows of Change, the Kislevite faction got the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts, a rather larger-than-life creature, something that isn't historically known to be Kislevites, but new lore suggests otherwise. The Akshina Ambushers, which are some very powerful ambushing-based missile infantry, which are quite good in melee also, and finally the Thing in the Woods, also known as Beowulfs. This is a chaos creature, but it seems that the lore suggests otherwise now too. While not the most, it has actually added in a lot of heavy hitting towards Kislev, a little bit of fast hitting too, plus the Akshina Ambushers are considered a staple in Kislevite armies now. In patch 4.2, 2 brand new additions came in. One being the Frostworm, a brand new creature which was always kind of hinted at in lore. This is a single entity monster which moves around incredibly fast and is able to do a decent amount of damage. The Frostworms are also introduced as mounts for both Catherine and the Ice Witches too, which gives you a monstrous mount to be able to use with your armies and be able to doomstack them if you so wish. Lastly, there was the introduction of the Kislevite Warrior, a low-tier infantry unit which some people scoffed up at the beginning, mostly because it is generally quite weak and obviously not being a hybrid unit puts it at a disadvantage, but I will say that after using them for a very decent amount of time, yeah, they are actually quite good and they do last throughout your campaign quite heavily. To supplement the fact that they get one less unit than everyone else, Kislev is also getting access to the Law of the Hag. This is available to Mother of Stenka and also to generic Hag Witch heroes that have access to the Law of the Hag. This spell law is brand new and allows Kislev to have a third unique spell law. What makes this even stronger is the fact that it is a very powerful spell law. The law itself is centered around blessings and cursings, just like Mother of Stenka, which means that when casting it normally, it's a curse, and when overcasting it, it is a blessing, essentially turning 5 of the 6 spells into another spell when you overcast them, totaling to 11 different effects that you can get with this new spell law. Lastly, we have Tzeentch, with the new legendary character being the Changeling. This is a character which focuses around a very different style of play to that of pretty much anyone else. The Changeling is a character which changes form. He turns into any character that he defeats, meaning that whilst playing as the Changeling, you are literally playing as everyone else. Just character, not their faction, however. And there are other ways to unlock it other than just fighting them. There are ways to even unlock random appearances, so you can turn into legendary lords that are way too far away from you. Unlike the other legendary lords, the Changeling is very well known, having been in Warhammer Fantasy and also Warhammer 40k for a long time, as demons are setting agnostic, so a lot of people are quite hyped up to see the Trickster, the one who has been causing so many wars in Warhammer lore. His mechanics are pretty interesting. As I said earlier on, you can focus around taking the shape of other characters, meaning that you'll get the strengths and benefits of other characters, turning into Festus to be able to do a lot of damage, turning into Scarbrand to rip apart enemies. It's a very unique way of playing as every single character that you can get access to. The faction itself is incredibly unique, not building up an empire, but instead establishing cults throughout the world. Your armies will generally be hidden, and you'll be able to wreak havoc as a unseen force throughout the Warhammer Fantasy universe. This also does mean, unfortunately, that the faction is fairly difficult to defeat when you're playing as another faction. Not only that, but it does get a little boring as playing the Tzeentchian faction sometimes, because you can't lose. It's very difficult for you to lose. However, you can have a lot of fun, especially with the scheme system, which allows you to go into different theaters of war. This is cut up pieces throughout the world map itself for Immortal Empires and also the Realm of Chaos, and yeah, you can have a little bit of fun. There's different events that you can do. These are all triggered by doing various different things, like destroying a certain faction, or killing a certain character, recruiting a certain amount of units. It's pretty fun, and it also allows you to then teleport to the other theaters, different sections of the map, so you can then start causing havoc over there. It's incredibly unique and very different, and it obviously fits with the Tzeentchian theme quite heavily. I think that the only big negative regarding this, and regarding the Changeling as a whole, which would have made it much more fun, is if when you started your campaign you were able to pick where you would be able to start. There's loads of different theaters. It would have been cooler if you would have decided, okay, today I'm going to play as the Changeling, as a fresh new campaign, and I'm going to start in Grand Cathay, which is a lot of the established lore regarding Yuan Bo versus the Changeling, by the way. Had this been an option, as it is entirely possible, given that we've seen mods be able to do this, it would have been a really cool thing for the Changeling, and also given people a lot more reason to actually play him multiple times, starting from different locations and having a little bit of fun like that. A faction can indeed have the most unique campaign possible, but if it's a one and done, unfortunately it's a one and done. Alright, we're going to move on to the legendary hero, this being the Blue Scribe, available to a number of different factions. It's not just the Tzeentchian monogod ones, and yes, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, legendary hero in the game. This is because as he levels up, you can get access to more and more spells because of his randomly generated magic system, and also making them stupidly cheap. You're essentially blasting out spells constantly. It's incredibly fun to use, especially as Kairos, so yeah, no complaints about this character at all. Alright, so now we can talk about other stuff added in. First up, we'll talk about the Lord and Hero choices, as these were added in 4.2. So, we've got the Chaos Lord of Tzeentch and the Exalted Hero of Tzeentch, two melee-focused characters which are available to the Tzeentchian monogod factions, and also to the Warriors of Chaos, who have access to any Tzeentchian troopers, so the Undivided ones and also Village the Curseling. They are powerful melee-based characters, and finally giving a proper frontline to the Tzeentchian armies, which desperately needed it. Most of your other stuff is spellcasters, making them a little bit squishier. Yes, you do have the Chaos Lord and the Exalted Sorcerer of Tzeentch, but even then you still wanted to have some anti-large heavy hitters which could take out pretty much anything else. I like them, it's about time that it got added in. The fact that the Chaos Lord of Tzeentch himself looks absolutely Tzeentchian, like a proper Tzeentch character, and the Exalted Lord is a throwback to a lovely 90s model from way back in the day. It's good to see these finally added in. And now let's talk about the units themselves. So we do have 5 new units, 3 of which were added in the initial release and 2 afterwards. When it comes to the original release, we have the Cockatrice. This is a flying single entity monster, which is pretty good at what it does. It's got Petrifying Gaze too, which lowers enemy speed, but in general, this is a big monster that's got terror, it's got barrier, it's got poison attacks and magical attacks. It's good at what it does, and that is taking out enemy characters, war machines, or just getting to the enemy through the flank or the rear. Zangors, unfortunately, have taken a major nerf in 4.2, with turning them into basic gores rather than bestigors with hand weapons and shield. I'm absolutely devastated by this, as it's made them a lot weaker. They're still very strong for what they are, but it's really disappointing that Creative Assembly have done this. I'm not sure if this is on the direction of Games Workshop, but if it is, Games Workshop should stay the hell away from this game, giving what they need to, but when it comes to stuff like this, yeah bro, shut up and let the cash cow be the cash cow. The next unit is the Mutilative Vortex Beast. It is actually an undivided character, but it was added into Tzeentch. It is a absolutely powerful single entity monster which constantly does damage to enemies around it. It's also very devastating in its own right when it starts doing melee damage, so yeah, it's a big staple when it comes to being a Warriors of Chaos monster, and also with a Tzeentchian monogod faction. In patch 4.2, we had the addition of 2 new units. The first one being the Changebringers, which are Flamers of Tzeentch mounted upon the Discs of Tzeentch, making them very fast moving and still being as powerful as Flamers generally are. It's a very good unit that was introduced originally during the Storm of Chaos campaign back in 6th edition, so it's nice to see that back. Lots of nostalgia goggles here, but it is actually very good as a unit. The next unit is the Centaurs of Tzeentch, which... yeah, Centaurs of Tzeentch. They're very powerful, they're actually very, very good in combat. They're also available to the Beastmen, but we'll get to that a little bit later. As a unit, they're perfectly fine. The only real problem I have with the Centaurs is they should have looked more Tzeentchian. A few additions here and there to make them a little bit more mutated would have been perfect. We'll talk again about the whole beak situation and uniqueness a little bit later. Overall, the Tzeentchian stuff is pretty good. I would say that the Changeling, unfortunately, is not that replayable, but it does buff up the army for Tzeentch a lot more. It does benefit a lot of other factions too, but yeah, if you're playing as Kairos, if you enjoy playing as Kairos, this is going to really fill out your roster a little bit more. If you enjoy Village or if you enjoy the Beastmen, once again, you're going to be in a better position. Right, we're going to talk about the FLC very quickly because we've got 2 pieces of FLC. This is a called Hellbrass. That's a character which is a legendary hero for the Tzeentchian monogod factions and also for the Warriors of Chaos faction. He is incredible at doing some damage, has a bunch of interesting effects. There was a lot of Tzeentchian focus when it came to certain things through this DLC. Clearly, stuff like the Changeling got the most budget when it came to design, and I think a lot of people were kind of tired, especially when the FLC was also a Tzeentchian unit, well, legendary hero. But that was supplemented with 4.2 now, as we do have some more FLC content, which is Katarin's sled. We finally have the sled that everyone's been asking for literally 2 years now. It's actually been 2 years since the game has been released. It proves that if you yell loud enough, eventually Creative Assembly will have to budge. Well, that and the fact that there was a major shit show revolving around Shadows of Change, they have to start making some concessions to pacify the fan base a bit. Before we head off into the other stuff in the review, we have to talk about other factions getting some love. So, the Beastmen benefit greatly from this patch in this DLC, as the content in Shadows of Change allows the Beastmen to get access to the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts, a very powerful large monster which kind of fluffs up their army a bit more. We also get access to the Centaurs of Tzeentch and the Zangors, so this now provides you with 3 new units, meaning that I very much doubt that the Beastmen are going to get DLC in the future, but they will continue to get fluffed up as more Chaos DLC does come out for the Monogods. We are expecting Pestigors, for example, and potentially another Beastmen unit for Thrones of Decay, so those things would easily come into the Beastmen roster and really give them a little bit more strength. It's a shame that they didn't get the Cockatrice. You never know if that changes in the future, however, but it's nice to see a bunch of new additions helping out other factions when need be. The Warriors of Chaos also get access to the Chaos Lord of Tzeentch, the Exalted Hero of Tzeentch, the Mutilative Vortex Beast, and the Cockatrice, providing you with a big monster, which always cool, a flying monster, and 2 monogod style characters, which a lot of people wanted originally anyway in Champions of Chaos. It's nice to see them being added in, as it gives me hope that we're going to see the missing Lord and Hero variants when it comes to Thrones of Decay, and a potential future Slaanesh DLC if that is still happening. The fact that Creative Assembly are also using unique appearances where applicable also is quite nice, considering that I was worried that everything was just going to be a recolor or a reskin. The Chaos Lord of Tzeentch looks very unique, unique when compared to the other Chaos Lords, especially since it's Tzeentchian, so it has that Tzeentchian feel. And again, the Exalted Hero looks fantastic. I'm hoping that this is going to be the case with the other spellcasters when we eventually see them. Alright, so we've discussed all the content within Shadows of Change. We now need to start discussing the price. So as we are aware, the price is €25 or £20 depending on where you're from. The price will also vary. Originally I said that this was not worth the price because it was way less than what people were getting originally anyway. It's actually quite disappointing that that was the case, but since then, we've seen a massive addition to the actual product, which makes it more in line. I still wouldn't say that it's worth €25. For context, I have to pay €25 because where I'm from, Steam location forces me to pay in euros. I'd still say that this is worth around 20 instead of 25. Now, I do have to come in with a disclaimer here. I did not buy this DLC. I was a part of Creative Assembly's now defunct creator program, so I did receive this DLC originally for free, but I do see the value of the product regardless. It's why I was so hostile towards it when it was originally announced, and especially as things started getting worse. The price is also subjective to some people. Some people would more than happy pay €25 for this, and to be honest, I can see why. We're getting 6 legendary characters in total, which means 6 big names throughout the Warhammer Fantasy universe. We're getting 3 lords, 3 heroes split between all the different factions, 16 units total, 9 regiments of renown, which I generally never cover regiments of renown as I don't see them as unique things, a magical lord, and 2 FLC. The price is definitely getting a lot better for what it was, and I would say if this was originally shown off, I would be more than happy to pay €25 for it. That being said, the main thing about this is you can always find deals online. There's always 10, 15, sometimes 20% off through various different websites. You should always try to find the best deal that you can find because at the end of the day, it's your money and you have to spend it how you wish. I'm never going to judge anyone for paying full price. At the end of the day, I said this on the original review too, that it's your money and you can do whatever the hell you want with it. I feel like Thrones of Decay, which will have similar styles of content, will likely be thought of better because there's no bad taste in everyone's mouth though. Whereas this one, let's be honest, it was kind of sullied because first up, it was the blind side of less content, then the really poor speaking from Creative Assembly, which was just horrible, and then all the other drama that appeared. I think why I'm still a little bit disappointed with the price is we didn't see any big changes coming towards Tzeentch Standard or Kislev Standard, which is a little bit annoying. The tech tree for Kislev is still not great, and there's a few changes here and there that could have been done. Same thing with Kislev Atamans that really need to be fixed up here and there. Cathay did get some big changes though, even though that they aren't visual, like for example tech tree and pretty much how harmony works and so on, which makes them a lot better. But it was mentioned in the original roadmap that there were going to be some race updates. Yeah, you know, where are said race updates? Those are adjoining with the patch, not actually the DLC, but the fact of the matter is that when a DLC launches with a big patch, the budget for the DLC has also gone into said patch. Looking forward, if DLC is going to be the size of Shadows of Change, I feel like things are going to be a lot better received by the community, especially when we start looking towards stuff like Thrones of Decay, where we're expecting very big things. Tamacon was pretty much already confirmed. I'm expecting Elsef, and obviously we do have the dwarves coming in. There's a lot of stuff that's missing, which are big ticket items, so I imagine that Creative Assembly are going to want to do big stuff to be able to get the community back up and running. I think the update towards Shadows of Change is a lot better, and it's definitely making things a lot more in line with what we come to expect when it comes to a price like that. They have to make something really special with big racial reworks to be able to justify a third of the price of a base game. I'm not sure who sets the price, but I'm thinking it's going to be Sega, especially as Sega are known for these types of tactics. The community definitely wants more DLC, and it's something that we've all been vocal about, not just players, not just content creators, but everyone in general. The problem is we want the value with the product. Again, step in the right direction. I'm optimistic for Thrones of Decay, especially as we know that we're getting an FLC Legendary Lord there too, as Legendary Lords are more valuable than Legendary Heroes, of course. But I'm taking advantage now and leaving a message here for Creative Assembly, better yet said their management and Sega. It's important that you guys know that at the end of the day, the fan base decides if they're going to buy or not. You might see value in something, or better yet said, a manager might see that they could try and take advantage of this, because yes, Total War Warhammer has been a cash cow, but at certain points the fan base knows when it's enough. Instead of jumping into a DLC like that and actually trying to essentially scam everyone with the original version of Shadows of Change, communication would have been better. Communication in a better written light than it was in that really awful statement prior, because we know that the game is expensive to maintain, and we know that such is the cost of supporting Warhammer 3. We want to support Warhammer 3, we want more content. It's not just about getting DLCs for the races, but also getting potential new race packs, map expansions, all that type of stuff. The fanbase is more than happy to support stuff, especially when they see value from it. It's very important when concept is drawn up for DLCs that you look towards it not as a corporation, but as a fan. There are many fans within Creative Assembly who work on these games. Ask them, would you pay this to get that? And whilst we're at it, a little message towards Games Workshop if possible. We know the IP is set in different ways, but it's really hilarious when certain things like Hag Mothers or even Beaks for Zangors can't be used when we have the demons from Age of Sigmar, or even the End Times, which is supposedly a separate IP. Why is it we can't get Beaks for Zangors, right? Something that we know is a thing and has been in lore prior to Age of Sigmar, but we can actually get the Keeper of Secrets looking like the Age of Sigmar variant. The same thing with the Lords of Change, the Great Unclean Ones, and so on. We get that IP protection is a very big thing, but the problem is that this IP is something that you own. I'm not sure if the IP lawyers have no idea that they can easily mix things around, but again, same thing with Blue Horrors. They weren't a unit in Warhammer Fantasy, they were a token system. Now they're a unit. Had the IP been laxed a little bit with your permission, we would have been able to see Zangors with beaks, for example, which again, I know is not a very big thing to some, but it would have made the DLC a bit more valuable because it would have made the Zangors look a little bit more unique. Right now, they were Bestigors and now they're Gors again, just finely colored and with a unique shield, and that's it. Something like that is nothing that is big IP bending. And at the end of the day, you guys get a very big cut from these DLCs. It is very well known, so these things would make it sell more. It's weird considering that Games Workshop is one of the greediest companies in the world, selling 20-year-old Upshati for £52, which is wild, by the way. And the fact that that concept art for the Beak Zangors does exist, it would just be better. It's not only just about Peak Zangors, by the way. This would be Rotfly mounts for Chaos Lords of Nurgle, because that is more of an Age of Sigmar thing, but it did exist in artwork prior in Warhammer Fantasy, but we all know well enough that Games Workshop will make the stupid decision to say, no, that only exists in Age of Sigmar, because yes, play Age of Sigmar. The lore changes don't mind. This is a thing. I've made my peace with Oni Mother Stankia being a Hag Mother, the Oni Hag Mother, better yet said, and no Chicken House. That's a lore change. Perfectly fine. But stuff that exists in Age of Sigmar should not be taken away from Warhammer Fantasy or the potential of being added in, because core factor is what sells the product. And I'm only saying this because we have to think about the future for more DLCs. We want cool factor, but we don't obviously want the same thing over and over. Now I want to talk about one thing before we end. We've got two ebooks, two very important ebooks in terms of establishing the lore of characters that are just completely brand new. I do hope, however, that a lot of development time, because of budget, hasn't been cut because they had to make these ebooks. At the end of the day, they still have to pay David Geimer, and I'm very appreciative of those books, don't get me wrong. They are fairly well written, and let's be honest, they are still better than the current only novel for Warhammer the Old World, but again, I really hope it hasn't taken away from it. I guess we'll see when it comes to Thrones of Decay. If Thrones of Decay does have a lot more content than it did for Shadows of Change with 2 patches, it could probably be tied to the ebooks. And if that's the case, maybe less ebooks. Hell, you guys have storyboard writers in CA, you know, that was the whole thing with the Reign of Chaos stuff. You make use of them, unless they're not capable of doing so. Again, I absolutely adore David Geimer's writing, but it shouldn't be at the cost of the DLC product. A free book is always nice here and there, but it shouldn't take away from the stuff that people are actually paying for. Same development time, sure, but I'd rather have more fun to play with a ton of new units, you know, or just a bunch of new characters than it would be having the book. Better yet said, maybe the in-game story could introduce the characters a lot more, because that was quite lacking. So I'd say that the DLC now is probably worth as €20 or 25, depending on the person. Again, not going to judge you if you decide to pay full price, and I do think that it could be justified to a lot of people for the full price. I would say try and find a deal somewhere. Instant Gaming and so on has those things. I don't have those creator codes myself. I'm not really one of those people that do that. But yeah, if you can find a deal, try and find one. If you're a Cathay fan, this is definitely going to be much more noticeable for you. It's definitely a good DLC for that to add in. Tzeentch also, especially if you like playing Chaos in general, because you'll be able to play with the new toys with the Warriors of Chaos and the Beastmen. And Kislev feels a lot better. Kislev feels a lot better. The Kislevite Warriors are a good addition. It would have just been nicer we would have had a few more variants of the Kislevite Warriors just to be able to have some more cheap frontline troopers. But you tell me, what do you guys think about the update to Shadows of Change? Is it now worth it for you? I am very curious to see what you guys think, especially after everything that's happened. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. This is going to be the only video for today. I generally don't release videos on release days, but it's a patch day, not really a DLC release day. So I figured I'd put my final thoughts out whilst you're waiting for the patch to download and so on, because it can be a bit of a stretch, you know, especially since it basically makes you re-download the game fully. But yeah, have a good day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon.